I think everyone would say multi-layer audio is a million times better than single layer audio. The audio in this film isn't great. Like, it doesn't sound great, but it's all about what they were trying to capture, you know?
Yeah.
It's all about the way that they were trying to tell this story.
Who do you think you are? You're nothing but a court jester. What I want to know is what you think of it.
It's a bit of a jumble, a collection of fragments that leap around in time like Mexican jumping beans.
Welcome to my mind, old sock.
Drive-By Movies here. You're watching
Fresh Releases.
My name's Blaze.
And I'm James.
And this week we're talking Netflix's own Mink.
Mank. Mr. Mankowitz.
Action! Herman Mankiewicz.
In Mink, 1930s Hollywood is re-evaluated through the eyes of scathing social critic and alcoholic screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz as he races to finish the screenplay of Citizen Kane in 1941. This is the new movie that is exclusive to Netflix, and it's also the latest from David Fincher, who hasn't had a movie in 6 years. His last movie was Gone Girl. And this is a very different movie for David Fincher. Excited to talk about it. He's one of my favorite directors. Blaze, what do you think of Mink?
I have to say, I was thinking about this a lot, like while watching the film, but also even before. I was like, what exactly is the David Fincher style? I know that he is an auteur, but I just don't think of him. I feel like when I think of like most auteurs, I feel like they have such a like style where he also has a style. We just recently watched, and you'll hear about it on later this week. We watched The Game, and I feel like his style, it only slightly changes from movie to movie, but I feel like this film totally diverts from the style that you know him from. And it was kind of a refreshing thing to see a David Fincher movie that didn't feel so much like his most recent work, like Gone Girl, or what's his show that he does currently on Netflix? Mindhunter.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like those are very similar. When I think of him, I always think like a very tight writing, and this had great writing, but it also was just very different. Even though I know he's not a writer, I always feel like the scripts that he picks are very tight. And it just felt like a very refreshing take for what I was expecting from David Fincher himself. But I'm curious, what did you think of this film?
Yeah, so I did a little research about Mink. David Fincher, I mean, his favorite movies, my favorite movies from him are like, you know, the classic ones like Zodiac, The Social Network, Seven. The only movies I agree 100% with, like his movies like kind of have a look but don't really, now not so much. Lately they have a look. The only really theme that they kind of have is just like they're dark in tone and might be like colored, or like, you know, the lighting and shadows are a little bit dark. But the only movies that look relatively similar are just The Game, Fight Club, and Seven. And coincidentally, all those movies were shot on film. Starting with Zodiac, that was his first movie that went into digital, and he's been a guy who's always been like a digital man, like amongst a lot of filmmakers who always like prefer to use film and want to stick with film and stuff. And those movies, I feel like, had a look to them, and now he's just kind of changed up his style, whereas he always focused on going for strong scripts. And this movie, I mean, after doing research, it's the only movie his dad ever wrote, apparently. It's written by the late Jack Fincher, who died a little over a decade ago, or a little under a decade ago, somewhere around there. I was really interested to read up on that, and this was a movie that he intended to do after The Game, I believe I was reading. Mm-hmm. But the studio he wanted to work with, like, they didn't want him to shoot it in black and white. They didn't believe in that. Mm-hmm. So I can definitely see like why he wanted to shoot in black and white. It was really cool. And one of the things that really shocked me when watching was the use of a single like editing timeline of audio dialogue. It's hard to describe, but like if you edit and stuff, usually different sounds and sound effects and music will be played on different timelines and stuff, and like all at the same time to kind of balance everything, but everything's used singular here, which gave it a cool sound, which I would have loved to have seen in theaters to hear how it sounded and how it translated that way. But that caught me off guard, and I knew right away what he was going for that, and that was cool and stuff.
So it's definitely gonna warn the audience here. It's probably gonna get kind of nerdy because I feel like when I watch this film and kind of when I think about this film, I was just definitely taking in all the aesthetics of the movie, and I mean I absolutely loved the script. I thought it was a lot of fun. I love these type of like inside Hollywood movies, so this was really cool to see like the inception of Citizen Kane on a script level, and like the story of its screenwriter who really only like wrote this movie, won an Academy Award for it that he shared with Orson Welles, but did, you know, not really go on to too many things afterwards, and this was his best thing he ever did, essentially. So it's kind of like a curse in a way as well. But I mean, Orson Welles himself shared that same curse that Mankiewicz, like they both kind of shared that curse. Like Orson Welles was never really fulfilled as an artist, even though Citizen Kane is considered the greatest film of all time. So I think that there's a lot of fun stuff in there if you're a fan of movies. But I kind of want to talk first about the aesthetics of this movie. And it's funny that you had mentioned the sound. It was like that was something that stuck out right away. I was like, oh, the sound is done so old school. There was so much work put into the sound of like the sound effects, the sound editing in this film that just made it, you could tell right away how like much work it looked like, because it just sounded so different than movies nowadays. It sounded like as if like, you know, one of the first kind of talkies where it was, like you said, the sound's only on one track, so you're really limited with the things you can do. You can't just layer 40 layers of sound effects and ambience and all this stuff going on. So that was something that really stuck out to me. But I thought it was interesting to put that much effort into the sound. But yeah, I know Fincher is just such a digital guy that they shot this on digital, where it's like,
yeah, that was cracking me up.
It made no sense to me.
Film, like you could have gone with 70 millimeter film, and that would have looked crazy. But it was just funny, the idea of doing all this work with sound, but shooting in 8K and stuff. Like I know that's Fincher's way; he just likes working with digital, but just like, because it's in black and white, because they're going for this old school sound and this look and stuff, like why not go with film? And I was just like cracking up at that idea, and I'm glad that you're calling out like what else are you thinking?
It was annoying. I don't know, it was kind of annoying. Like I hate to be like kind of a biter. I'll say this, it definitely was one of a kind, because I don't think anyone else would ever do this, because I didn't feel like it was a good idea. Like, just if you're trying to emulate the sound to be like as if you shot it back then, or the sound was essentially, they did a sound work that was similar to what back in the day when they were shooting on film in like the 50s or even earlier than that, because this film takes place earlier than that. It's like trying to emulate that sound work, but yet the film was so digital, and it's like I would have even been fine if they just threw some film grain on it. I know some guys online that sell film grain scans that are only like $100. Like everyone can afford that. Like if they're worried about money, I know that like if you have a budget like this film probably had, just shoot it on film. Like honestly,
not only that though, but there was also the editing effects of like the reel change that you see at movie theaters. You would see the little black spot in the corner. I was losing it at that, because that's what really brought it out for me, was when they were showing like the film burn-ins, but yet there was no grain. That's what made no sense to me. And this is, I know this is super nerdy and super nitpicky, but it's just like, why do we even throw the film burns in if you're not even emulating the grain? Like, I don't mind that it was shot on film, but emulate the grain if you're emulating film burns, because film burns on digital doesn't make sense. So was just that. I think that's what made it annoying. If there was no film burns, I still would have thought about it because of how much work they put into the sound. There was so much work to put into the sound to make it that level. And like, honestly, if you're gonna complain that digital is better than film, you can make that conversation. You can make that argument, of course, but no one out there is arguing a single layer audio is better than multi-layer audio. Right.
So I don't think that's even like an argument. Like I think everyone would say multi-layer audio is a million times better than single layer audio. The audio in this film isn't great. Like it doesn't sound great, but it's all about what they were trying to capture, you know? It's all about the way that they were trying to tell this story.
Right. And yeah, like it does have the typical like David Fincher like edit cuts where it's a lot of long takes, and you can tell that like each scene was done multiple times because there's like a long take, a close up, over the shoulder, all within one scene. It's the typical like Fincher editing way where you're showing all these different angles of the same conversation. They never lose momentum in acting. Kudos to the actors again. Like that's what Fincher's known for, like a modern day Stanley Kubrick. But yeah, like it has all those like so much detail going into it that like kind of annoyed me too, where I was just like, why not go that full way with just using film, or just edit some extra effects in there and stuff. Like, not to take away, this movie's still beautiful, like it has all the great shots and like great editing that I was like looking for and stuff. But yeah, that was one thing that was just throwing me off. If you're gonna go with all these different like feels and like tricks to make it feel old, why not just go the full pull and stuff? And yeah, like, you know, we saw it with like Quentin Tarantino's The Hateful Eight, like one of the movies that like was shot in 70 millimeter and stuff. And like that was cool. And even last week's Wonder Woman for fresh releases that we were talking about, we're kind of bringing up like, would seen it in a theater would have saved this movie, and absolutely not for Wonder Woman. For this movie though, I just would have loved to have seen it just for the sound effects, I guess. Yeah. And you know, like maybe seeing seeing how it would have translated and stuff, just because like, you know, watching it on a 4K TV was great and stuff, but you know, would have loved to have seen what this would have translated like onto a screen, like not so much like seeing it in a multiplex theater, but seeing it like if you're in LA, like a small Lemley theater, that would have been lovely and like kind of a fun experience.
Yeah, definitely. I do feel like when I think of, we were talking about Fincher as a director and as an auteur, like when I do think of him, I think of like the word sanitized. Like everything's just usually so clean, or looks such a specific way, whether it's taking certain colors out of the frames and just being limited to like a very limited palette that's like so specific and clinical. He chose every color he wanted in. He didn't want a color that was, you know, didn't match the palette that he was going for. And I do feel like him choosing to shoot this digitally, but use all these kind of filters and lenses, and even the red camera that they chose to shoot this film with only shot, I'm pretty sure it only shot black and white. Like the sensor wasn't even capable of shooting color. So they really went all the way with shooting this a very specific way to give it that filmic look. But to miss the grain, it seems like they put in so much attention to detail that just go all the way. Just give us a little bit of grain. Come on. I don't know. I felt like I'm not asking for much here. And that was just a little nitpicky thing that was slightly annoying, but I understand why he chose that. But I really don't believe that should be the hill to die on. Like I felt like we saw, and you mentioned Wonder Woman, and that was something that kept coming to mind. Is like, we just watched a $200 million movie with a lot of visual effects shot on film. And I thought Wonder Woman looked great. Okay, the story's not good, but the film looked great. And it was funny to see two different filmmakers, Patty Jenkins and David Fincher, dying on two separate hills. Fincher is doing this indie kind of movie about film history, and will not shoot it on film. He refuses to. He's gonna die on the hill of shooting on digital. And Patty Jenkins is gonna shoot this Avengers style action superhero movie. I guess Avengers isn't the right word, but a superhero action movie. And all those are shot on digital because they have so many digital effects, and it's easier to layer those in. But yet she's gonna shoot on film because she's a filmmaker who only shoots on film. So it's just, it was funny to see two totally opposite sides of the spectrum between 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing these movies that, like, you know, I assume Netflix intended to be like, this was supposed to be their Oscar swing of the year and stuff. And it even on the movie poster does say select theaters. It is playing at current theaters right now. Of course, most people I assume watched on Netflix last month. We're just barely getting around to talking about it because still not that many people are talking about it. I would have thought like a Fincher movie would have grabbed people's attention because, like, no, he's nowhere near on the levels like Tarantino or Christopher Nolan. But like, you know, his movies still do well though. Like I remember Gone Girl was still a pretty big box office success. And, you know, like you can say like Ben Affleck had to do with it, but I think most of it still had to do with like, you know, its premise and then the good reviews and it being David Fincher. And because like I think audiences have come to realize like David Fincher, it's very rare for him to make a bad movie. I think there's his movie. This is one of his movies where it's definitely not my favorite. It's kind of in like the middle of the pack, like the lower ends, like of course, Alien 3 is his worst movie, and he will tell you that, of course, too. But like, yeah, I think this is more like on the level of like I'm glad that he did it. It's definitely a passion project movie for him, and I'm glad that he got a chance to like, you know, make his dad's screenplay into real life. But yeah, it's pretty good. I'd say it's just like on the lower level, like a little bit better than Panic Room, about the same level as A Curious Case of Benjamin Button, but nowhere near up there with like a Zodiac or Social Network or Seven, I'd say.
Yeah, it was a very different movie for him just because it doesn't carry some of those same kind of themes that a lot of his movies have, or even the tone. Like, I do feel like a majority of his movies have really darker tones, like you're saying. And this is like, it does have some dark elements to it just because, you know, not everything pans out the way that it would in a Hollywood movie, essentially. And this is a film about old school Hollywood. But there is a lot of fun things there for people to enjoy film history. Like, I think that any of these types of movies where it's like talking about the history of film, I've talked on the show about how I love just any documentary that talks about, you know, a movie being made or anything like that, where this is like, you get this behind the scenes look that is probably, you know, somewhat fictional for the most part, but it's based on true events. So I did find it a lot of fun. Like, there is some moments that are pretty funny here and there, and it's an interesting movie because it's definitely a love letter, like Fincher's love letter to his, you know, late father. So I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's his best movie, but it was fun to see something from him that didn't really feel like him at all. Besides the fact that it was shot on digital, I felt like that was really the only thing for me. I thought Gary Oldman's performance was just absolutely delightful. It was a fun watch.
Yeah, my closing thoughts. Like, I think this is everything I wanted from Trumbo. That was a movie that we saw a few years ago that we were very disappointed with. It just felt very bland and boring, and we wanted it to go more all out with its setting and stuff, but it just felt like a TV movie. And nothing against Bryan Cranston's performance in that movie. I thought he was fantastic in it, but like, I wanted to see it, you know, taken by like a better director and stuff. And this was more along what I wanted and expected out of that movie. So I was glad that I got to see it, and would have loved to have seen it in theaters. Just, you know, it made me realize I do kind of miss the theater experience for movies like this. I don't need to see big action movies in theaters. Like, these are the movies I'd love to see in theaters. But yeah, for those of you who haven't checked out, it's been on Netflix for a month. It's like exclusive on there. So that's a great way by helping us out by just watching the movie and letting us know what you thought about it. Like, keep the conversation going. Leave a comment, letting us know what you thought about Mank and our thoughts on it.
And if you haven't already, guys, go ahead and smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and click that notification bell to get all of our latest updates.
If you can't get enough of us too, we're also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. All our links are down below. Be sure to check those out. And that'll conclude fresh releases for this week. Tune in next week for a brand new video.